Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, may the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So welcome everyone to this belated start to our Wednesday evening class. We're just starting our reading and discussion of the Bhagavad Gita. We've done the cosmology of the Gita, Appendix B, the translator's preface, and we're well along in Aldous Huxley's very comprehensive and thoughtful introduction. So, are there any questions or comments left over from last week? All right, then, we'll just turn it over to our very capable and loving reader, Swayam Prabha, and she'll continue where we left off in Aldous Huxley's introduction to Swami Prabhavananda's translation of and commentary on Bhagavad Gita.
If somebody can kind of orient me to where we had stopped, because
page 22, Swayam, page 22 in the preceding pages, page 22 on the book. If this is the same book.
Oh, in that book, well, my edition is different. I know we did the doctrines.
In the preceding pages, that's where we should be starting. Before ending, go to the previous page, introduction area. In the preceding pages, I have tried to show that the perennial philosophy, that's where we should be starting. I made a note there. Do you see it?
Yes, I got it. Thank you, Emma. Okay.
Sure.
In the preceding pages, I have tried to show that the perennial philosophy and its ethical corollaries constitute a highest common factor present in all the major religions of the world. To affirm this truth has never been more imperatively necessary than at the present time. There will never be enduring peace unless and until human beings come to accept a philosophy of life more adequate to the cosmic and psychological facts than the insane idolatries of nationalism and advertising man's apocalyptic faith in progress towards a mechanized New Jerusalem. All the elements of this philosophy are present, as we have seen, in the traditional religions. But in existing circumstances, there is not the slightest chance that any of the traditional religions will obtain universal acceptance. Europeans and Americans will see no reason for being converted to Hinduism, say, or Buddhism, and the people of Asia can hardly be expected to renounce their own traditions for the Christianity professed, often sincerely, by the imperialists who, for 400 years and more, have been systematically attacking, exploiting, and oppressing, and are now trying to finish off the work of destruction by educating them. But happily, there is the highest common factor of all religions, the perennial philosophy, which has always and everywhere been the metaphysical system of the prophets, saints, and sages. It is perfectly possible for people to remain good Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, or Muslims, and yet to be united in full agreement on the basic doctrines of the perennial philosophy. The Bhagavad Gita is perhaps the most systematic scriptural statement of the perennial philosophy. To a world at war, a world that, because it lacks intellectual and spiritual prerequisites to peace, can only hope to patch up some kind of precarious armed truce. It stands pointing clearly and unmistakably to the only road of escape from the self-imposed necessity of self-destruction. For this reason, we should be grateful to Swami Prabhavananda and Mr. Isherwood for having given us this new version of the book, a version which can be read, not merely without that dull aesthetic pain inflicted by all too many English translations from Sanskrit, but positively with enjoyment. That's the end of introduction.
And what is the date? What is the date of his? Does he have a date at the end?
Not at the end, no.
Okay, and what is the date of the publication of the book?
This one,
Well, the first edition. What is the first edition?
I'm trying to see. 1944?
Yes, A World at War. This was published during the war by Swami Prabhavananda very deliberately to bring some understanding. And as Huxley pointed to, didn't say these words, but he used the word systematic. Sri Krishna's Bhagavad Gita, this great song of God, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan, Bhagavad Gita, this great song of God is a workbook. It is a workbook for spiritual realization, for self-realization, for the realization of God. It works through in just these 700 verses, it works through every possible argument and doubt that we can raise in one way or another and vanquishes them and says, no, just believe in and do this and you will succeed, as he says in the end of chapter 2 about karma yoga. Karma yoga is a very systematic way of going about spiritual life. He says even a little practice of this yoga will save you from the terrible wheel of rebirth and death. We'll get to that. So before we begin the reading of the Gita itself, and we'll start with chapter 1, because I think it's very important for us to understand what it is that Arjuna is resisting. What is it that he does not want to renounce? I think it's very important for us to understand this, to again give us context for the rest of the Gita. But before we go on, is there anything about the cosmology of the Gita that we read, the translator's preface that we read, or this introduction by Huxley and his insistence that the perennial philosophy is present in all the religions and can arise as a way of creating harmony among all the religions, which is the only way to any true peace, rather than the armed truce that he points to as the inevitable end of World War II. Anything at all from anyone? All right, let's just note that as in so many things, Aldous Huxley, Christopher Isherwood, and Swami Prabhavananda were very prescient in their seeing the need for this Gita, which became a New York Times bestseller and was very highly rated and reviewed by the New York Times, Newsweek, other publications as the most approachable and readable edition of the Gita that had so far been produced. Very high praise for Swami Prabhavananda and Christopher Isherwood in their efforts. And of course, it helped get the attention of these publications that such a notable person in the time, at that time, as Aldous Huxley was introduced the book, and it became known that he was Swami Prabhavananda's disciple. So if there's nothing from anyone, then Swayam can begin the reading of chapter 1.
Sure. First chapter, Gita and Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is said to be the longest poem in the world. In its original form, it consisted of 24,000 verses, and it grew to about 100,000. Like the Old Testament, it is not a homogeneous work, but a collection of narratives. Its central theme, as the name indicates, is the story of the descendants of King Bharata. Maha means great, and of ancient India, the land where Bharatas lived and ruled. After the death of King Pandu, the Mahabharata tells us his brother Dhritarashtra succeeded to the throne. Dhritarashtra educated the 5 sons of Pandu, the Pandavas, along with his own 100 sons. As they grew to be men, the Pandavas distinguished themselves by their piety and heroic virtues. In consequence, Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra's eldest son, became jealous and planned to murder them. Duryodhana's scheme was to build a palace in a distant town and invite the Pandavas to stay there during a religious festival. The palace was made of specially inflammable materials so that Duryodhana's servants could easily set it on fire. It burned to ashes, but the Pandavas and Kunti, their mother, had been warned in time and escaped. Duryodhana believed them dead. The Pandavas lived in the forest, disguised as Brahmins, meeting all kinds of dangers and adventures. One day, they heard that a neighboring king was to choose a husband for his daughter. The winner must bend a bow of enormous strength and hit a tiny target. The Pandavas thought they would try. They went to the city in their disguise. Suitors had gathered from all over India, Duryodhana among them. One after another, they failed in the test. At last, Arjuna, third of the Pandavas, stood up, bent the bow, and hit the target with the greatest ease. Draupadi, the princess, threw him the victor's garland. But the assembled princes could not accept this humiliation at the hands of a seemingly poor and unwarlike Brahmin, there would have been a fight, just as in the story of Ulysses, if Krishna, who was present, had not intervened and persuaded them that Arjuna had a right to his bride. Krishna was a cousin of the Pandavas, but he was not one of Dhritarashtra's sons. The brothers took Draupadi back to the forest where Kunti was awaiting them. Mother, they cried, we have brought home a wonderful treasure. Be sure to share it equally, my children, Kunti answered. Then she saw the girl and exclaimed in dismay, oh, what have I said? But it was too late. Her word was sacred to her sons. So Draupadi married all the brothers together.
So this in the age when it was very common for a man to have many wives, but virtually unknown for a woman to have many husbands. So this is one of the divine being winking at us, showing us that Draupadi now has, because of what Kunti said, she married all 5 brothers, and so as a woman had 5 husbands. One would say, a unique circumstance in that time, which was approximately 2500 BC. Any comments or questions while we're paused?
I do have a question, Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
So the other day, we were having dinner with some friends and we were talking. Somehow the topic came to our epics, and 2 of the women were talking about, telling their children stories from the Gita, Mahabharata and Ramayana when the children were growing up. Now, when we were growing up, we heard the same stories, but somehow we never thought to ask questions. But this generation, they seem to be sort of, I would say, almost appalled when we tell them the stories like this, that this king had 2 wives and they murdered this one or that one, or even the story of Ganpati that Shiva chopped off his own son's head, and oh, how could he do that? So how do we narrate these to the younger children of this generation?
Well, tell them that this is in the historical context. There's nothing unusual about that at all. Worldwide, this was the way royalty and people of position behaved. There was nothing surprising about this. And this is just the way it was historically. At that time in the world has evolved and evolved. But lest we think there's any cessation of this kind of behavior, just look at the series of assassinations in the 1960s, starting with John F. Kennedy. So this behavior has not stopped. It's perhaps less than it was, perhaps not. There's a lot that is hidden from us. So the children should not be surprised that these things happened historically. This is part mythology and part historical fact. All of our written histories are part mythology and part historical fact, because those who tend to write the narratives of what happened are the victors in any given situation. So they tend to mythologize, inflate themselves, which is why history now is more prone to study what actually happened to the lives of ordinary people in the epochs of history, rather than just these stories and narratives of the mighty. But the children should not be at all surprised that this happened historically, and you can point out to them that this violence has not stopped. There's no mystery to it. Is that an adequate answer?
Yes, I think it will help.
And it's very good that they ask these questions.
I'm sorry?
It's very good that they ask these questions rather than just because when you don't ask questions, you tend to just discard things. You either swallow them whole, which is rare, and they become articles of unquestioned faith, or you discard them because they seem incredible or unimportant to you. So it's good that the children ask questions and try to resolve why this is important to the adults. That's why they ask the questions. Why is this important to you? What is it that you are finding in this that we should pay attention to? Good for them.
Vishana, can I add something?
Please do.
See, when you asked this question, I was thinking why would what would be my reaction? And one of the thought that came to me is that, am I judging it right or wrong myself as well, or seeing it's possible or not? Then I thought, what if we just that this is so mystical, that this is the mysticism of the consciousness, or whatever we're going to call it. If I take it like that, then it's like, wow, that's like that's what I got when I moved away from judgments.
Very well reasoned, Somesh. That's very well thought. That's a good insight. First, your insight that, am I getting this right? Certainly, as Aditya Chaturvedi points out, the Ramayana is, we know primarily Valmiki's Ramayana. He says there are many, many Ramayanas. Practically every language in India has its own Ramayana. For example, the Gita tends to be less varied in its substance, but the Mahabharata, not necessarily so. But the Ramayana, as told by various cultures in India, is a very different book. He explained this to me one afternoon in some detail, and it really surprised me because I didn't know this at all. So this mysticism, this what is historical and what is mythology, very, very different from culture to culture, from state to state, language to language in India. Valmiki's Ramayana has become the most popular among modern readers and scholars, but is by far and away not the only telling of Rama's incarnation. So very good, well thought, Somesh.
Thank you.
Brother Shankara, I want to add something to all of your comments on this.
Yes, dear.
When I was young, I asked my mother. My mother only had spiritual education. She didn't have any formal education in the school, or only up to 5 grades at home. So I asked my mother, how can a lady can have Panchali can have 100 children, mom? That's what I asked her. I mean, how can a lady, Dhritarashtra's wife, Gandhari, she could have 100 kids? I mean, how long she has to live to get the 100 kids? That was my question, because I was so confused. And then my mother said, those were divine days. People didn't have to have a union of man and woman to have children. They could provide children, like Karna. Karna was not born from her stomach. He was a divine child to Kunti. So that's how my mother's answer was. Those were divine days with the divinity that they could produce, with that power, divine power, they could produce children like that.
This was a very interesting answer.
Yeah.
It's also likely that Dhritarashtra had many wives, so that these were the children of many different women, rather than just produced in a divine way. I don't know that Dhritarashtra had that power of producing children. Whether the Pandavas did, as you pointed out, that's a different issue. Whether Kunti had that power, but nevertheless, it's this is why these things are shrouded in myth. This is why in his talk, in one of his talks in Jnana Yoga, Swami Vivekananda says, this is all of these stories, all of these tales, all of this, all of Maya is a kind of mythology. That's what he says. And Swami Sarvadevananda, when he visited here, spoke on that one afternoon, one Sunday. So you can find his explanation of what Swamiji meant when he said that.
I truly believed it, Brother Shankara. When I was little, I believed it.
Well, of course. One believes one's mother.
Yeah.
Particularly if she's credible.
Yeah, she was telling all these stories. So then I believed what she said. Now I can see we have electronic power. In those days, the divine power, this is electronic age. You can push a button and demolish another country, things like that. Like yes. Krishna does that from his spiritual power. He could do that in those days.
Yes.
And now look at this electronic age we are living in, how powerful it is.
The end of the Kali Yuga is a very different time than it was at the time of Sri Krishna and the time of the Bharata kings. Anything else from anyone? All right, dear. I think this was a very good interpolation and a very good discussion of some important points. This is what's meant by studying the art of spirituality together. So let us plunge on.
Okay. Be sure to share it equally, my children, Kunti answered. Then she saw the girl and exclaimed in dismay, "Oh, what have I said?" But it was too late. Her word was sacred to her sons. So Draupadi married all the brothers together. Dhritarashtra and his son now knew that the Pandavas were not only alive, but allied by marriage to a powerful monarch. Duryodhana was for carrying on the feud, but Dhritarashtra wisely listened to the advice of his uncle Bhishma, which was to send for the brothers and offer them half his kingdom. So the kingdom was divided. The Pandavas got the worst of the land, a wilderness along the Jamuna river. They cleared it, built a fine city, and crowned Yudhishthira, the eldest brother, as their king. Now the 5 brothers lived in triumph and splendor, and Duryodhana hated them more than ever. His jealousy hatched a new plot for their ruin. The pious and noble Yudhishthira had a dangerous weakness for gambling. So Duryodhana challenged him to play dice with a clever sharper named Shakuni, knowing that the king would feel bound in honor to accept. They played. Shakuni cheated. Yudhishthira lost game after game, staking his wealth, his kingdom, and finally his brothers, Draupadi and himself. All were now slaves of Duryodhana's vengeance, subject to insult and cruelty, until Dhritarashtra intervened and insisted that they be set at liberty and their kingdom given back. But Duryodhana worked upon his father until he obtained permission for another dice match. The loser was to forfeit his kingdom and retire to the forest for 12 years. Then he must live for a year in the city without being recognized. If he was discovered, the term of exile would begin again. This game Yudhishthira also lost. So the Pandavas went back to the forest. They made a virtue of their misfortune, practicing spiritual austerities and doing many heroic deeds. Once, during their wanderings, we are told, the brothers suffered greatly from thirst. Nakula, the youngest, was sent to look for water. He found a lake which was clear as crystal. As he bent over it, a voice said, "Stop, child. First, answer my questions. Then you may drink." But Nakula, in his desperate thirst, paid no attention to the voice. He drank and immediately fell dead. His brother Sahadeva went out to look for him. He too found the lake, and the same thing happened. In this manner, 4 of the brothers died. Last of all came Yudhishthira. He found the corpses and began to lament. Then the voice told him, "Child, first answer my questions. Then I will cure your grief and your thirst." He turned and saw Dharma, the personification of duty and virtue, standing beside him in the form of a crane. "What is the road to heaven?" the crane asked. "Truthfulness." "How does a man find happiness?" "Through right conduct." "What must he subdue in order to escape grief?" "His mind." "When is a man loved?" "When he is without vanity." Of all the world's wonders, which is the most wonderful? That no man, though he sees others dying all around him, believes that he himself will die. How does one reach true religion? Not by argument, not by scriptures and doctrines. They cannot help. The path to religion is trodden by the saints. Dharma was satisfied. He revealed himself to Yudhishthira. Then he brought the 4 brothers back to life. When the
Okay,
period
let's just pause for a moment and review the questions that Dharma asks Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira was, though he had this weakness for gambling, he was the wisest and most dharmic of men and rulers. So let's review again, because I think this is included here for very good reason, what it is that the questions that that Dharma in the form of this crane asks Yudhishthira. So start with the first one and read them again slowly. And if anyone has any comments or questions as we go along, don't hesitate to interrupt and ask a question or make some comment from your own wisdom or experience. So please read the questions again, dear.
Sure. So the first question, what is the road to heaven? The crane asked. Answer was truthfulness.
Okay, let's just think about this, truthfulness. This is what Sri Ramakrishna says also, emphasizes again and again, that the austerity of this age is truthfulness. It is the road to realization. So it's so interesting and relevant that the very first question that is asked is this one, and the answer is truthfulness. Anything else from anyone about that?
Yes, Brother Shankara. I always have this thing with truthfulness that I'll give you an example that all right, I want to compete somewhere, okay, and I'm really scared that I cannot do it, and so I keep coming up with reasons, okay, and there are times when the reasons look so real that they are, that's why I cannot do it. I'm old, I'm this, whatever we am telling myself. So I sometimes it's hard to find what is the truth. Is uh, like, to my mind, uh, there are moments when I think, oh no, I still can do it, even with the reason. There are moments when I think that, no, I can't. Look, I'm I'm old. I've never prepared for this. All those reasons. So how do we find what is the truth?
Uh, This is a very, very good question. Of course, it's a struggle for us to know what's the truth. Because, as you said, our mind is so resourceful in providing falsehoods and semi falsehoods. This is why it's said in the Gita over and over, the way to know the truth is through meditation, the practice of meditation. When we go beyond and below, sink below the level of the mind to where the heart does not deceive. The heart will tell you the truth. And this is why Swami Vivekananda says, when it comes to an argument between the head and the heart, go with the heart. So this is the only way that we can really know the truth of a given situation, is to take it into contemplation, concentration, and the practice of meditation, so that we sink below the level of our mind. Our mind is a very necessary instrument, but it is just exactly that. As Einstein said, it is the servant. Below that servant and within ourselves is the genius. And he says we've created a culture that worships the servant and ignores the genius. And it's one of the reasons that truthfulness is practically non-existent in our society. And it's all right to lie. So very good question, Sumesh. Is that a decent answer?
No, that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
A very good question. Very, very good question. Anything else from anyone? All right, dear. Second question, second answer.
Second question is, how does man find happiness? Answer, through right conduct.
This is, of course, one of the great principles of Buddhism. You find happiness through right conduct. And right conduct will, and again, discerning what is the right conduct requires interior work, discerning what is the right thing to do, so that you don't contravene, you don't go against what is the right conduct. And so it is, these are all spiritual challenges. Anything else from anyone about right conduct as the answer to, what is the question again?
How does a man find happiness?
Happiness. Happiness. What do we want? We want happiness and freedom. Okay, so the happiness portion, how do we find it? Right conduct. And of course, that is the whole message of chapters 2 through the end of chapter 2 through chapter 5 of the Gita on karma yoga, is what is right conduct. And Krishna makes it easy for us to do the right thing, because he tells us exactly how to approach it, how to think about it, and always with meditation, concentration and meditation as part of the equation. Anything else about this question and answer.
Brother Shankara, actually, I just remembered something related to the previous question of truthfulness. Sri Ramakrishna, I remember reading in the Gospel that, and I forget the details, but he had promised somebody that he would visit him, and then he kind of got busy and was didn't have time until like it was really late at night. But because he had given his word, he walked to that person's house, and he didn't like knock on the door, but he literally went up to the door, and then he like came back because he didn't want to break his word that.
Well, what he actually, the man he had promised was his provider and devotee Jadu Malik, and he had told Jadu that he would visit him. And the day passed, as you say, and everything. The master's days were very busy sometimes. So, as you say, it got to be nighttime, and so he walked to Jadu Malik's house, which was not terribly far, but it was a walk. And what he did is he opened the door and just put his foot inside. Just put his foot inside. And then he later said, well, perhaps I don't have to have such a mania for that kind of truthfulness. And he, it was keeping your word, yes, but even he said that may have been excessive. So again, as we find in the Gita, Sri Krishna talks about moderation. But how do we find what is the right thing to do? What is moderation? It's always introspection. It is not trying to answer the question with the mind. Anything else? Thank you for that, Swam. That was a good addition to our talk about truthfulness.
Yes, it was helpful to hear from you the clarification that even Sri Ramakrishna thought it was excessive, because if we try to measure up to that yardstick, we would.
Oh, well, we should never use the master as the measure. We cannot. This is the master of the universe in human form. There's no way that we can use the master as our. He is a guide. He is a pointer. But we cannot expect, and we must not expect ourselves to behave as the master behaved. There's no way we're going to do it. Or Holy Mother. These holy ones, or Vivekananda, come to that, or Raja Maharaj. These are divine beings. These are beyond our capabilities, but they gesture to us, and they leave behind to us how to behave in a way that will be auspicious for us as we make our way through this murky world, this semi-lit world of light and darkness. So as Somesh pointed out, it's sometimes very hard to discern. And so we need to first have the guidance of the saints and the divine ones, and then we need to do our own introspection. Introspection and finding that the knowledge of the heart, the wisdom of the heart, is our best resource.
Mm-hmm.
So the third question here, if there's nothing more about the second.
Yeah, it's 8:34, Brother Shankara. Do you want to?
Well, we started late. How does everyone feel about continuing another few minutes? Or do you want to just leave it there? And thank you for pointing out the time, dear. What do you think? Shall we wind it up there and pick it up again with the questions next week?
I can continue.
Yeah, I think Brother Shankara, you depending
4
on
minutes.
your health.
That's right.
I'm feeling all right. We can go on for another. Let's go on for another 10 minutes.
Okay.
So go on with the third question. Thank you so much for providing some leadership there.
So the third question is, what must he subdue in order to escape grief?
So the question is about how to escape grief. Now we're looking at another one of the fetters. Grief. How do we escape grief? And the answer is,
His mind. So we have
what
to
must he
subdue his.
subdue to escape grief? His mind. Because it is within our mind that all of this suffering takes place. And what does it mean to subdue the mind? It means not allow it to be predominant in our living. We put the guidance of the saints and the scriptures. We put that first, and then we accompany that with our own introspection. That's how we subdue the mind. That's we put the mind in its place. The mind is necessary, clearly. We cannot navigate this world. We cannot keep poverty from the door. We cannot play the game of life successfully without the mind. But it must not be allowed to be predominant. The servant must not become the master. And so we subdue it by taking the advice and the instruction of the scriptures, of the saints, including our guru, if we are fortunate enough to have a human guru, and then of course following those instructions of the scriptures, the saints and teachers, we do our own introspection. And it is a moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day thing. Our introspection should not end with our sitting on a cushion and practicing 20 minutes of japa. That's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. Every moment should be a matter of, does this deserve my attention? If it deserves my attention, I should give it my full attention and be intentional. So first attention and then intention. Be fully intentional about what I do and how I do it. And Holy Mother left us instructions. How do we be intentional? How do we go about things? Be calm and thoughtful, thorough and complete. So when we've decided what we do through this calm and thoughtfulness, then we do it thoroughly and completely. And this subdues the mind, puts it in its proper perspective, in its place.
Brother Shankara, I was just thinking that the word subdue, especially in the modern context, is like an aggressive word, like overcome by force, subdue somebody. Whereas contemplation or introspection is the gentle way,
Well, the Swami used the word, and remember it was used in 1944, but subdue doesn't necessarily mean, it has more than it has more than one connotation. Its denotation is to simply not allow it to be predominant. That's what subdue. If you look it up in the dictionary, you'll find that to subdue something it means not to allow it to be first and foremost. To subdue an enemy, of course, this is another and strong meaning. But we sometimes have to be somewhat forceful with the mind, because the mind will be forceful with us. It will be very insistent. Anything else from anyone about this subduing the mind? We're carefully considering each of these questions because they are so important. Swami Prabhavananda would not have this here if this were a very important introduction to what we're going to read from Sri Krishna.
Unless we subdue the mind, we cannot get to the intellect and the conscience. Right,
Yes.
Brother Shankara? So that is why he's saying subduing, in a sense, it's getting it under control, not like completely step on it. No, it's just.
Well, you're exactly right, dear. We are not going to get to the Jnanamaya kosha, the buddhi, and the Jnanamaya kosha, if we have not subdued the body, the vital force, the pranamaya, and the manamaya. Until we have learned to sink below those three sheaths or koshas, the Annamaya kosha, the outer gross body, the pranamaya, which is the vital force within us, and then that's the second sheath, and then the manomaya, the mind sheath. Then we encounter the Jnanamaya kosha, the fourth of the koshas, which is the buddhi and the intellect, as you said. Then we have that which knows from its inner resource. And where does it draw its inspiration? From the Annamaya, the Anandamaya kosha, the causal body, the bliss body, because that is radiating only the divine truth and the divine attributes. And it is that radiance that animates the other four sheaths or koshas. So you're absolutely right.
Mind seems to direct us the egoistic way. Mind always plays games.
Oh, yes.
Just to think of the mind, then our ego is playing dominant there. And then if we go beyond that, then intellect and consciousness, Atma, Paramat, Antaratma. So then that's where we're grabbing intellectual ability, I believe.
Yes, and the word conscience,
More conscience, that's where we are getting there.
Right.
So that is when we make better decisions, even though it may look like wrong for some people, but that is the.
Well, this is why it's so hard to understand the behavior of the saints.
It is so complex.
Because they're not answering to the same considerations that motivate us. So I think that'll do it for this evening.
Thank you, brother.
It's now 8:43. So those of you who joined us this evening, please let your heart be full of forgiveness for my forgetfulness. I simply went from arati into practicing concentration and meditation because there was something on my mind. And so I was not mindful of the fact that it was Wednesday and there was class. But Cindy and you all managed to make it happen anyway. So we got it done. So thank you very, very much for your patience, your forgiveness. And we'll end as we do. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. And may we be always and know we are always in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Father and Mother. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Abhirvoiti. O dearly beloved Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Jai, 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 Jai. So until Saturday, for those of you who join us for the Saturday noon class on Swami Prabhavananda's How to Know God, which is Patanjali's workbook for how to subdue the body, the senses, and the mind. That's exactly so that we can get beyond that to concentration and meditation. So we're well along in chapter 2. I think that we just read 27 and 28, shlokas 27 and 28 in chapter 2. So is there anything else from anyone else before we go ahead? All right, dears. Triguna, I encourage you, if there's ever any question, do give me a call. You have my cell phone number, so the question that you had for Cindy, you can just anything that comes up, you can bring it up with me. It's my job. So good night, everyone.
Good night.
Much love, and there's such gratitude for you people. So glad you're here and we're doing this together. Well, let's see if I can find I need to find the switch here. There we go. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you. Bye.